If nature is the standard that reveals God to us and the things of God, then what does nature tell us about the afterlife? Hello, I'm Chris Meyer. Welcome to session 14 of Are We Being Deceived? Searching for Truth in Religion. All of the mainstream religions teach that there is another life that a person experiences after this one. That death is merely the door that leads to another very different existence. But if we look to nature for evidence of this, nature really doesn't give us any indication of another life after this one, whether in heaven or hell. The only possible indication of an afterlife is what we see with the rejuvenation of plants. In very early times, the idea of a plant dying and a new plant emerging the following season was considered as a sign of new life springing up after death. Also, many ancients thought of the rising and setting sun as the death and resurrection of a new day. The celebration of the new year symbolized the end or purging of the world and its regeneration or rebirth. It seems as far back as there have been religious ideas, there has been the belief in a resurrection or some kind of life after death. The best evidence that this concept of resurrection was prevalent in early religion is from artifacts discovered from the excavation of ancient burial sites. Men were buried with food or wagons or weapons. Some were even buried with servants, horses, and wives. Early believers were convinced that these things would make the journey easier or more comfortable for the individual who had died as they traveled to the next life. One of the most intriguing documents concerning death and the afterlife is the Egyptian Book of the Dead, also called the Book of Going Forth by Day. In his introduction to the Book of the Dead, the Papyrus of Ani, Paul Mareki explains the purpose of the ancient writings. He says, "The Book of the Dead did not have a single author, as it is a composition work written by unknown Egyptian priests over a period of nearly 1,000 years. Beginning in about 2400 BCE, the priests and their educated scribal assistants inherited some of the writings now in the Book of the Dead and added new ones as needs arose. They first wrote these hieroglyphs on tomb walls, then coffins, and finally on papyrus scrolls for members of the royal family and the elite classes. These priests claimed to hold the keys to knowledge of life itself, including the nature of the underworld and the afterlife. And most importantly, the rituals the deceased must perform in order to attain a successful journey through the underworld passages leading to the afterlife." In addition, the idea that we were made in the image of the Creator, and believing that the Creator is immortal would seem to imply that we too might possess a soul or spirit that is immortal. If we assume that we do possess this immortal spirit, then some kind of life after this one might be waiting for us following this earthly life. But we should also understand that whatever it is, if it exists at all, will be totally different from this one, since it will be a spiritual world and not a physical one. Attempting to envision what this new life will be like and what we will be like is really a waste of time, because it will be so totally unlike anything that we're familiar with. Furthermore, if we've concluded correctly that God is perfect in goodness and love, then any kind of afterlife would be a very positive experience. Being subjected to a place of torment like a torturous hell would be contrary to the character of this perfectly good entity. In other words, if God is perfectly good to us while we were on this earth, then it would follow that God would also be good to us in whatever comes next. So I suppose that would eliminate the popular theology of a place called hell. Let's discuss that for a minute. Some will argue that God has given us a free will so that we can make our own decisions, and that we should be able to choose whether we want to love God or not. And we should be able to choose our own destiny. We should be able to choose where we will spend our next life, whether in heaven or hell. The question is, can a man choose who his mother and father will be? And when we are born to that couple, aren't they our parents for as long as we live on earth? Oh, sure, we might choose to be adopted and under the law get new parents. But our birth parents, those with whom we share our blood, our DNA, will always remain the same. God has created us all. We are God's creation, and we always will be. Do we make decisions in this world that determine our destiny? Evidence from history indicates that we do. Other people also make decisions that can determine or greatly impact our destiny. But we are always God's. Is there anything that can separate us from the love of God? Even if we decide not to love God in return, will God not love us still? I have 2 sons. They will make decisions that will impact their lives. But I will always love them, even if they despise me. You see, they have no control at all over my love for them. As noted earlier, if God's love is unconditional, then it is not dependent nor affected by our decision to love God back. Would I, as the father of my 2 sons who love them, ever allow them to go to a place like hell for eternity? Absolutely not. Even if they chose to go there, I would know that they really didn't have adequate knowledge of such a place to make such a horrible decision. So not only would I not allow them to go, but I wouldn't even create such a place in the first place. It's totally outside the character of God, as we have defined the character of God, to have created such a place as hell. To understand the justification for the concept of hell, we must once again look closely at the order of life on this earth. As we have discussed, this world functions on a system of opposites. If there is good, there must be bad. If there is joy, there must be sorrow. So it only follows, if there is a good place where good people go when they die, then there must be a bad place where bad people go. The creation of one place, a good place, requires the creation of a second place of opposite value, a bad place. In addition, there are those who seem to need some kind of threat of punishment in order to make good decisions, both morally and ethically. There seem to be those who refuse to act within the bounds of socially accepted behavior unless they are threatened with some kind of disciplinary action. This disposition might be a result of the environment in which they were raised, or there might be a myriad of other causes. But the fact is, if there is no threat of punishment, then these people will behave impulsively or act out of greed or selfishness, which will have a negative effect on the community or on other individuals. For many, it is the threat of eternal punishment that is a deterrent for wrongful actions. On the other hand, some people simply do not take the time to adequately and logically weigh the consequences of their decisions. Therefore, their behavior is based solely on impulse and immediate gratification. So it becomes hell and the eternal punishment of God that is the threat or deterrent that keeps these people on the straight and narrow. As I mentioned, there's nothing in nature that really indicates that there is anything waiting for us after this life. So the afterlife is more a conjecture based on the assumed immortality of the soul and the rebirth of the dead plant and the rising and setting sun. However, neither really needs proof. Let me explain what I mean. If we live our lives after the example of the Creator, kind, loving, and caring, and we accept that God calls us to care for others as well as the earth on which we live, then we don't have to worry whether there is a heaven or a hell, or even if there is an afterlife. Whether it is heaven or reincarnation or nothing at all, if we have lived this life doing the best that we can, then the next life will take care of itself. In the Hindu religion, it is taught that what a person does in this life constitutes his karma. When a person is reincarnated, his karma, his actions in this life, determines what form he will take when he returns to earth. So it holds true in every religion. What we do here and now, the decisions that we make in this life, affects our existence in the next. If we examine religious ideology concerning the afterlife, it seems that there could be 3 options. A place of enjoyment, because God has provided such a place for us here. Reincarnation, or the transmigration of the soul into another life here on earth. Or there is nothing at all. We simply leave and no longer exist. Since there is no real proof of an afterlife of any kind, we should live as if this life is the only one that we have, and we should do our best to be the best we can be and contribute the most that we can here and now. Another important aspect of religious ideology that should be considered in regard to our study is prayer. We'll discuss that in the next session. Now, I really don't cover everything in these little video snippets that I cover in the book. So if you want to read more about it, you can get my book, Are We Being Deceived? It's available at Amazon.com in ebook and paperback, or you can order it through your local bookstore. I'll see you for the next session.